We're holding the Gemara today on Daf Nun Amud Beis, the last two words. Amar Rava. The Gemara here goes back to the Mishnah, where you had the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel in the beginning of the Perek, where Rabbi Gamliel says, Ein get acha get, v'loi maimer acha maimer. If a Yavam gives a get for one Yevama, then he gives a get for another Yevama, the second get is ineffective. And the same thing, you maimer for one and maimer for another, the second maimer does nothing. The Gemara will now explain the Pshat in Rabbi Gamliel's opinion. Amar Rava, so Rava says, my time with the Rabbi Gamliel. What's the reason for Rabbi Gamliel? So he explains as follows, and Rashi said this in the Mishnah as well. Misapkele get, so he has a suffix about this get. Idachi, iloidachi. Whether this get actually takes effect and pushes away the Yevama, or maybe it does not take effect. Right, so this is actually a suffix that he has, even in Atayra. In the Torah it says he should do chalitza, but he has a suffix regarding this get, even in Atayra, whether it takes effect. And the same thing as well, maimer, he has a suffix regarding maimer, ikani, iloikani, whether this maimer takes effect or not. So since he has a suffix, it's going to come out that the second get and the second maimer will not take effect. Why not? So the Gemara explains, b'manavshach, idachi. So if you're going to say the first get was doiche the yevama and it took effect already to push off the zika altogether, so then did I go back up a line over here? Huh? Just a second. Get, again, he has a suffix, again, sapkele get, idachi, loidachi, maimer, ikani, loigani, kani. Get, okay, so now the suffix regarding a get, idachi, iloidachi, whether it pushes off or not. So now, ikam, the manavshach is as follows. Ikamadachi, if the first get that you gave was already doiche, this yevama completely, so then basar my kovet. The second get that you're giving for the other Yevama is doing nothing. She's like just a woman in the street. You're giving a get to a woman in the street. What does it do? Now, if the first get was ineffective, was not daiche, so then basar nami loidachi. The reason is because a get by a Yevama doesn't do anything. So if it doesn't do anything for the first Yevama, it doesn't do anything for the second Yevama as well. Now, the same thing we say regarding Maimer. Maimer as well, ikani loikani. He has a suffix if the maimer is kaina or the maimer is not kaina. And therefore, same memonavshach. Ikamakani, if the first maimer took effect, so then basar maikovid. So then the first one totally took effect. Now this is like his wife. So now the second one, he can't marry her. So the second one doesn't do anything. V'kamaloikani, if the first one does not take effect, because by a yevama, this kiddushin does not take effect, so then basar nami loikani. So just like it doesn't take effect for the first, it doesn't take effect for the second. So therefore, the point is it's a suffix. So if it's a suffix, so then Mimanavshach, the second get, or the second maimer, will not take effect. Eis ve'Abaye, Abaye asks on this pshat. Here he brings a braise where it elaborates more on what Rabbi Gamliel said, and it's not going to fit with this hezber of Rava. So the braise says, Rabbi Gamliel will agree, sheyesh get acha maimer, that the get has a koyach, does take effect to some extent, after maimer. Umaimer acha get. And maimer also takes effect after the get. Right, so even though Rabbi Gamliel says there's no get after a get, and there's no maimer after maimer, but a get after maimer and a maimer after get will take effect. And the get achar bia umaimer. And also a get after bia and maimer, which means that if this person did maimer for one yevama, then bia for another yevama, and then afterwards a get, so then all three will have a certain effect. That's what Rabbi Gamliel is saying here. And similar, he says, Umaimer achar bia v'get. And if he first gave a get to one yevama, then he did bia with another yevama, and then afterwards he does maimer again, that maimer at the end also takes effect. That's what Rabbi Gamliel holds. So the Gemara here is going to focus on the last two cases. In these last two cases, you have the bia that he did in the middle. Either he started off with maimer with one yevama, then he did bia with another yevama, and then following that he did a get again. Or not again, but he did a get for a third yevama. Or he started off with get, and then bia, and then maimer. But the point is, in these last two cases, the bia is in the middle. That's what he did in the middle. So now the question is, why does Rabbi Gamliel say in both of these cases, in both of these last cases, that after he does bia, a get after the bia, or maima after the bia will still take effect? According to Rava, that shouldn't be so. Why not? So the Gemara explains, Now, if Rabbi Gamliel has a suffix about the maimer, that maybe the maimer takes fully effect, maybe the maimer does not take fully effect. Or, regarding the get, he has a suffix about the get. Maybe the get takes fully effect, maybe not. So then if so, tehevi kibiyah de lachatchila. In both of these cases, where the biyah is in the middle, that should be like a biyah that's done in the beginning. And if it's a biyah that's done in the beginning, what did we learn in the Mishnah? If a yavam goes and is miyavim a yavama that is, he does a biyah lachatchila, that biyah takes fully effect. So Rashi explains, if the point is that when he does maimer or a get, we have a suffix, whether that maimer or get takes effect, so then memonavshach. If he gave the maimer and the maimer took fully effect, so then after the maimer, nothing else should take effect anymore. The maimer took fully effect, the biyah, the get afterwards should be nothing. If the maimer did not take effect at all, that's the other side of the suffix, so then the biyah that he does following that should take fully effect. That's like a biyah lechatchila. And once you do a biyah, full yibum, right in the beginning, nothing after that follows. This is your regular wife now. And the same thing also in a case where he did a get first and then biyah. So if the get took fully effect, so then the biyah is nothing. And if the get did not take effect at all, so then the biyah is like a biyah lechatchila. So why does it say over here that in these two cases, when the biyah is in the middle, that you can still give a get for a third yevama or still give maimer to a third yevama? After the biyah, there should be nothing. V'tikni, so the biyah should be kind of all the way. And the Gemara here brings what we learned in our Mishnah. In the Mishnah we learned, habi'ila, if a yavam goes and is boiled, the yavama, he's miyavimer, bizman shehi betchila, if that's the first thing, ein achrei klum. So he did the mitzvah, and that's it. Now she becomes his wife, and there's nothing that follows after that. So therefore, Abaye does not accept Rabbi's pshat. Elam Abaye says a different pshat, a different way of understanding Rabbi Gamliel's opinion. La'olam, the truth is, pshita leila Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel does not have a suffix about this. Rabbi Gamliel, it's obvious to him that beget the dochi, that the get that you give to a yevama has a koyach to be doicha her, u'maimer the kani. And a maimer also has a koyach to make a kinyan of kiddushin. But now Rashi adds to that, when the Gemara here says that a get is doicha and a maimer is kaina, it doesn't mean fully though. It means that the maimer will be kaina partially, and the get will be kaina partially. So he doesn't have a suffix. He agrees in the premise of the inyan. He agrees to the Rabbanan's opinion, which is that the maimer and a get does not work fully, but it works partially. There's no suffix about this. But now, what is his opinion? Miu, however, Omer Rabbanan, what the Rabbanan said is as follows. Ha Yevame, when it comes over here to this Yevame, b'chad tzad mahani ba get, that there's a koyach, that a get has a partial koyach to sever the relationship partially. That's a partial koyach. Not fully though, even after the get, you're still going to need chalitza. U'b'chad tzad mahani ba maimer. Then there's a different partial koyach to create a partial kedushin with her. And again, that's not going to be like a full yibum, where he married her fully. It's only a partial koyach. So both the get and the maimer have this partial koyach, either to sever the zika partially, or to create a partial marriage with her. And therefore, what Rabbi Gamliel says is as follows. Get achaget loidochi. If you give one get to one yevama, then you repeat the same thing. You use the same koyach of a get again to another yevama. That same koyach is not going to be doich, is not going to work again. Why not? The hadacha lekama. If you're using the same koyach of a get that was doiche and did as much as a get could do, it's doiche the ziche to the extent that a get can. Repeating that same koyach of a get to be doiche that zike is not going to have the same effect. Whatever effect a get could have, it had already the first time. And the same thing also, u'maimer achamaimer, whatever koyach the maimer has to create a partial marriage. So if you're going to do that same thing again, loikani, it's not going to take effect. Hakani leikama. Whatever the maimer can do, it already did the first time. Repeating it a second time is not going to add anything. However, get achamaimer, u'maimer achaget, but if you first give a get that has a partial effect of pushing off the zikip, not a full effect. And then following that, you do maimer, which is a partial marriage. Or maimer achar a get, or the maimer following the get. So then, hai milsa kadochi, hai milsa kakani. Since each one has a partial effect, so the get could have a partial effect of being doicher, but it's not doicher the zika altogether. So therefore now the maimer is going to still have a certain effect to make a partial kinyan. Or if you do the maimer first, the maimer has a partial koyach to make a kinyan, but it's not yet a full yibum. So if it's not yet a full yibum, so then now the get could come along and also have a partial koyach to be doicher. So the point is, as long as you repeat the same thing again, so whatever partial koyach that has, it could only do it once. You can't repeat the same thing twice. But if you do once mimer and then a get, or once get and then a mimer, so then each one has a different nature of a partial koyach, and each one takes effect in their own way. That's Rabbi Gamliel's opinion. Now the Gemara explains the Rabbanan and the Mishnah disagree. The Rabbanan say that if you repeat a get twice or you repeat the mimer, it does take effect both times. Why? The Rabbanan say kol chad v'chad tekinu le Rabbanan get. The Rabbanan were misaken a koyach to give a get for one Yevama, to give a get for another Yevama. This partial koyach of a get, that Chachamim were misaken that it works by a Yevama, even though Menatayr it doesn't. Chachamim were misaken that it works for one, it works for another, and for each Yevama is another woman, and the partial koyach of the get will take effect, even when you repeat it again. So that's the basis of the Rabbanan's opinion. Now, the Gemara goes back to explain what we learned before in the Braisa, according to Rabbi Gamliel, in a case when you had the bia that was in the middle, right? You had a case of a bia in the middle, and either he started with a get and then did bia and then maimer, or he started with maimer and then the bia was in the middle, then afterwards get. So the Gemara now explains, according to this pshat of Rava, why we say that even after bia, the get takes effect, or the maimer takes effect. So the Gemara explains. So we have two cases here. Either the bia follows maimer, or the mimer follows bia. So the Gemara says, "V'hai bia psula." When you have a bia psula, what's a bia psula? When you did not do bia the first thing. When the bia follows either get or mimer that you already did to another yevama. That's called a bia psula. It's not a full bia because it's not, that wasn't the first thing that was done. So this bia psula adifa mimer. In a way, this bia has an actually stronger koyach to create a connection of marriage than the mimer does when you do mimer right in the beginning. On the other hand, though, there's another angle to this, which is ugriya mi maimer. That this bia that you do, which was not done in the beginning, has a certain deficiency comparing it to maimer. And the Gemara explains why this is. Adif mi maimer. On one hand, when you do a bia, even if that bia is a bia psula, you didn't do it right in the beginning, it's stronger than maimer. And what's the proof of this? Dilu maimer acha maimer le mahani. According to Rabbi Gamliel, when you do maimer once and then you repeat that and do it a second time, the second maimer doesn't do anything. But if you did maimer and then after the maimer you do bia, you did maimer for one yevama and then bia to another yevama. So even then, when you're doing bia to another yevama, the bia does take effect because the first maimer was only a partial marriage. Now, when you do a bia to another yevama, it does take effect. So I see that bia, that's a bia psula because you're doing it already after you did maimer to another yevama, but it's stronger than maimer acha maimer. So that's a stronger koyach of bia. On the other hand, ugriya mi maimer. This bia that you did after a maimer before, or after a get before, is actually less strong than a maimer that you do in the beginning. Why? Dilu maimer achara get kani lukule. When it comes to a maimer that you do after you gave a get, so that maimer is fully kaina. After you do maimer, after you gave a get for another yevama, that maimer takes fully effect, and after this maimer, so you don't have to do anything else. Just a second. This is the maimer after the get is kind of completely, right? As we said before, that when it comes to get and maimer, get has a partial effect and maimer has a partial effect. So if you do a get, if you give a get for one and then you do a maimer for another one, it takes fully effect. V'ilu, second, where am I over here? Yeah. Maimer acha get kani lukule. You gave a get for one, and that get took partial effect for one yevama, and now you do a maimer for another yevama. Whatever was left over of the zika, that maimer takes fully effect and is kind of completely. So kani lukule shiur the get. Whatever that get left over, because the get did not sever the zika completely. So whatever of the zika that get left over, the maimer is kind of completely. V'ilu bia achara get, but when it comes to bia that follows a get, lekanya lekul shiur the get. It's not kind of completely. What happens after you do bia after a get? You could still do a maimer after that. If first he gave a get to one yevama, then he does bia with a second yevama. Then if he goes ahead and does maimer to a third yevama, that maimer to the third yevama will take effect. Whereas if he does a get with one yevama and maimer with another yevama, once he did maimer and he wants to go and do maimer again to a third yevama, the maimer will not take effect. So over here you see that once you do maimer, the maimer is stronger. and another maimer will not take effect. But if you do bia to a second Yevama, a maimer after that will take effect. So therefore over here you see that the maimer is stronger. So those are the two cases that the Braisa before was speaking about, when you get to bia and maimer, whether the maimer is before the bia or the bia is after the maimer, because each one has a maila over the other one. That's why it says both of those cases over there.
But once you do bia, you're finished.
Usually, correct. But
how could you do maimer?
So no, over here though, you're right. Usually once you do bia, it's over. Now it's fully a wife. But over here we're talking about a bia psula. That before he did the bia for this Yevama, he gave a get to another Yevama. So it's the bia doesn't take fully effect because he already severed the relationship partially. And there's actually been a midrabanan, a lav of lo yibana. So this is a bia psula. Okay, now the Gemara brings another Braisa that goes through the same minyan pretty much again, adds some details in the machlokes of Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim. So Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braisa, Kate said, Rabbi Gamliel, how and when did Rabbi Gamliel say that ein get ach a get, that giving one get for a Yevama and then repeating and giving another get does not take effect? So the case is, Shtei Yevama shenaflu lefnei Yavam echad. You have two Yevamas that fell for Yibum to one Yavam. So not v'nasan get lezu, he gave a get for one of these Yevamas and then the get lezu, and then he gave a get to the second Yevam. Rabbi Gamliel laimes. Rabbi Gamliel says, what do? Chaylitz l'rishayna. Give chalitza for the first one that you gave a get to, and v'asa b'krev, and you'd be asa to any of her relatives, but a mutta b'krev shniya. But you'd be allowed to the second one that you gave a get to, because the second one that you gave a get to, the get did not take effect at all, and you didn't do chalitza to the second one. Really, you could give chalitza to the second one as well. But Rabbi Gamliel is telling you that good advice, give the chalitza to the first one that you gave a get to, so you'll only be asa to the first one's relatives. There's no reason to make yourself asa to the second one's relatives. So this is Rabbi Gamliel's opinion. The first get takes effect, the second one does not. The Chachamim disagree. Nasan get lezu, get lezu, you gave a get for one Yevama, then a get to a second Yevama, asa b'krei v'shtein. So now the second get took effect as well, so you're asa to the relatives of both of these women. And the chalitza lachas man, and the get does not fully sever the connection, so you have to do chalitza to one of them, to either one of them. The same machlokes here between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim also applies. B'shnei Yevamin v'Yevama achas. In the case where you had two Yevamin, and each Yavam gave a get to one and one with one Yevama. Now the other case that Rabbi Gamliel said in our Mishnah, so this Braisa elaborates as well. When did Rabbi Gamliel say that when you do maimer once and you do it a second time, the second time does not take effect? When you have two Yevamos that fell in front of one Yavam, and he did maimer for one Yavama and then maimer bezu, then he does maimer for a second Yavama. Rabbi Gamliel so for the first one that you did maimer, that took effect, so you have to give a get. And the chaylitz law, and you give chalitza to that one as well. And v'asa b'krevisa, and you'll be forbidden to her relatives. But a mutta b'krevishniya, the second one that you did maimer for does not need a get. The maimer didn't take effect at all, and you don't have to give chalitza for her either. You could just give it to the first one, and you'll be mutta to the second one's relatives. The Chachamim say, no, the second maimer took effect as well. So nice and get l'shtein. You have to give a get for both of them. And v'asa b'krei v'shtein. So you'll be asa to the relatives of both of them. And v'chalitze la'achas men. And you give chalitze to either one of them. And v'cheinat ta'emer, the same applies b'shnei yevamim v'yevama achas. When there's two yevamim here and one yevama. Okay, so this is the Braisa. So now the Gemara will focus on a few details of this Braisa. Omamar, it said before that noisen get lezu v'get lezu. If you gave a get to one Yevame and then to another Yevame, so Rabbi Gamliel oimer chaylitz l'rishayna. Rabbi Gamliel says you can give chalitza to the first one that you gave a get to, and once you gave that get, it partially severed the relation with her, and now you give chalitza to fully sever the relation. And va'asa b'kreviseha, and you'll be asa to her relatives, but a mutta b'krevishniya, since you're not giving chalitza or a get for the second one, so therefore, for the second one, you'll be totally mutter. But now the Gemara says, leimet to have it to yuftu the Shmuel. Let us say that what it says here will refute Shmuel's opinion. What did Shmuel say? And we learned this a while before in the Masechta. The Amar Shmuel said as follows: Chalatz lebalas haget leinifterat tzara. Regarding this case, if you remember, we had before a concept in the Gemara where the Gemara says where you have a weak chalitza. The Gemara calls it actually a chalitza psula, and you have a regular chalitza, a chalitza ksheira. Right over here in this case, there are two Yevamis here. To one Yevama he gave a get. To the second Yevama he did not give a get. When he gave a get to the first Yevama, so then the chalitza that he gives her is a weak chalitza. because he already began to sever the relationship through the get. When he gives her a chalitza, it's not a full-fledged chalitza, so to speak. But if he gives a chalitza to the second Yevama, to her he never gave a get. That would be a full-fledged chalitza. What Rabbi Gamliel is saying is, you can give chalitza to the first one that you gave a get to, and it's a weak chalitza, and that chalitza will also pater the other Yevama, which you did not give a get to, and would need a regular chalitza. So Rabbi Shmuel said that you can't use this weak chalitza to pater the other Yevama. You have to give the chalitza to the other Yevama in order for it to be a full-fledged chalitza. So this is what Rabbi Gamliel says. It refutes Shmuel's opinion. Amalach Shmuel, so Shmuel answers you. There's no question from Rabbi Gamliel. Why not? Ki yamri ano aliba demandama yesh zike. When did I say that you have to have a strong chalitza, and not just a chalitza psula, a weak chalitza, in order to sever the relationship? That's only according to the opinion that says yesh zike. If you remember earlier in the Masechta, we learned about the concept of yesh zike, that there's one opinion that says that the zike is very strong. That connection, even before you do yibum, is so strong that it's almost considered to be already like a wife. If you hold like that opinion that says yesh zike, then you need a proper chalitza to cut off that zike. So you can't give a chalitza to this woman that you already gave a get to. But Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is that the zika is not so strong, and therefore even if you give chalitza to the one that you already gave a get to, and it's a chalitza psula, that chalitza does take effect. So now the Gemara says, based on this, now if this is true, Rabbi Gamliel savar ein zika, if Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is that the zika is not so strong, so then Rabbanan savri yesh zika. We'll assume and say that the Rabbanan hold that there is a zika. So Rashi here actually says that the Gemara really has no raya to say that the Rabbanan that argue on Rabbi Gamliel here hold that yesh zika. What was the machlekes that the Rabbanan argued in Rabbi Gamliel? The Rabbanan said yesh get achaget, yesh maimer achamaimer. There's nothing really in the opinion of the Rabbanan that indicates that they hold yesh zika. But the Gemara is sort of assuming if they argue regarding yesh get achaget and whether yesh maimer achamaimer, and we said that Rabbi Gamliel holds ein zika, we'll assume that the Rabbanan hold ein zike. Again, the Gamliel holds ein zike, the Rabbanan hold yesh zike. So now the Gemara, if this is true, has a question. Ketani Seife, what does it say in the Seife, even according to the opinion of the Rabbanan? When you have two Yevamin that each is giving a get, and you have one Yevama here, so in such a case, what did the Rabbanan say? That you can give chalitza to either one of them. But the question is, so if he holds it yesh zike, so this should refute what Rabbi Bar Avhuna said. When you have a weak chalitza, which is what we're speaking about, because these two Yevamin already gave a get, so therefore the chalitza that they would give following that get is a postula chalitza, it's a weak chalitza. So when you give a weak chalitza, so both brothers have to give chalitza. Because both of these brothers gave a get to this Yevama. So therefore, the chalitza of one brother usually it will pater any of the other brothers of giving chalitza. But not in a case where you're giving a weak chalitza, that chalitza is not strong enough to pater another brother. But over here, the Rabbanan are saying that the chalitza of one brother will pater the other brother. So the Gemara says, there's no reason to assume that the Rabbanan hold yesh zike. Amalach Rabbi Bar Avhuna, Bein le Rabbi Gamliel, Bein le Rabbanan, both Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbanan Savri, they both agree, ein zike, that the connection is not so strong. And therefore even a chalitza psula will sever the connection. For one Yevama, it'll sever it for the other. Or for one Yavam, it'll sever it for the other Yavam, for the other brother. Over here, the machlekes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Gamliel is only regarding the subject that they speak about. Beget achaget, umayma achamayme kamiflegi. What they spoke about, that's what their argument is. But not regarding this question of yesh zika or ein zika. That's an unrelated subject. There's no shaychus b'chlal over here. That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. Okay, let's continue. Amar, it said before in the Braise, going back to another case and the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel. So it said, Asa maimer bezu or maimer bezu. If you gave maimer to one Yevama and then you give maimer to the other Yevama, so Rabbi Gamliel says, what do you do? Nice and get l'rishayna. You only have to give a get to the first one. Only for the first one did the maimer take effect. V'chaylitz law, and you give chalitza for the first one. And so you'll only be forbidden with the relatives of the first, and you'll be mutter to the relatives of the second. But now the point that the Gemara is going to focus on is, what does it say over here? After you did maimer, and you did maimer once, you did maimer a second time to another Yevama, so now you could only give chalitza to the first one that you did maimer for. Only chalitza, but you can't be miyavim her. The question is, why not? Let's see, Kasav Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel holds a maimer acha maimer. When you did give maimer once, only the first maimer takes effect for the first Yevamos. The second maimer does not take effect at all. So if so, Rishayna nami tisyavim. So the first maimer took effect, and now the fact that you did maimer to another Yevamos should not in any way interfere. Go ahead and do Yibum for the first Yevamos, and that's it. It's perfect. Maimer and Yevamos is good. Says the Gemara, no, there's a Gzeire b'derabbanan. Gzeire dilma asi liyevumi l'shniya. If we allow this person to be miyavim, the first wife, the first woman that he did maimer for, he might come and make a mistake and do yibum for the second one that he did maimer for. And for the second one, he can't do the yibum for, because the maimer already took effect only for the first Yevamos. So it's a Gzeire b'derabbanan not to do maimer. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, not to do Yibum, did I say? Okay, not to do Yibum. Rabbi Yochanan now says regarding this opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, that Rabbi Gamliel, or Beishamai, Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, Rabbi Nechemia, all of these Tanoim, Kulus Virulu, they all hold that Maimer Kaina Kinyan Gomer, that Maimer has a Kinyan Gomer. Rashi says, when the Gemara here says the Lashon Kinyan Gomer, doesn't literally mean that Maimer is a full Kinyan like Yibum, but it has a strong Kinyan enough that if you're going to do a second Maimer, the second Maimer is ineffective. All these Tanoim agree to this. Rabbi Gamliel Hadam Maran, Rabbi Gamliel is what he says right here. And Beishamai, where do we see Beishamai's opinion? So this is something we learned before in the Mishnah. The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Beishamai says, Shloisha Achin, when you have three brothers, Shnaim Mem Nisuin, L'shtei Achayos, two of the brothers are married to two sisters, and Ve'echad Mufne, and now the third brother is single. Meis Achad Mibali Achayos, one of these brothers married to one of these sisters, passes away, V'asa Ba Mufne Maimer. And now this single brother went ahead and did Maimer to one of these sisters. And now the second brother passes away. So now there's another sister that's up for Yibum. So Beishamai says, Ishtay imai, this wife that he did Yibum, that he did Maimer for, that Maimer is very strong. It takes effect as if this is Mamish already his wife. And therefore, Vahalazu, now the second sister that fell for Yibum, takes him, she just doesn't, there's no Yibum for her at all. It's a Arba, it's a Chais Isha, and therefore she can just leave. That's Beishamai's opinion. If you remember, Beis Hillel disagreed. Beis Hillel says when you did Maimer for the first sister, that Maimer didn't take fully effect. So therefore, you have to leave from this wife that you're with now, and then you have to give chalitza to the other one. But over here you see Beishamai's opinion that once you do Maimer, the Maimer takes effect enough that now the other sister can just leave. That's Beishamai's opinion. Rab Shimon also, we see similar Rab Shimon, the Tanya, and Rab Raisa later here in the Masechta. Amalu Rab Shimon l'chachamim. Rab Shimon said to the chachamim. So this is actually not speaking about Maimer, but this is speaking about a case where a person does Yibum, which is Biyah, to a cotton, which is Ben Tes Shanim V'Yom Echad. He's 9 years old. So the question is, when you do Yibum for a cotton, which is 9 years old, does that Yibum take effect? So the Gemara over there brings that the Tanakama holds that there's a suffix about this. Maybe it does take effect, maybe it doesn't take effect. Okay, so here on that, Rab Shimon says, so Amalu Rab Shimon l'chachamim im biyas rishim biyah, if the biyah of this child, this 9-year-old child that did the biyah took effect, so then biyas sheni ain't a biyah. So then the biyah of the second one does not take effect. In biyas rishon ain't a biyah, and if the biyah of the first one does not take effect, so then biyas sheni nami ain't a biyah. So then for the same reason, the biyah of the second one should not take effect. So that's what Rab Shimon is saying over here. So again, let me just repeat this again. The Chachamim actually said that the biyah of the first takes effect, and the biyah of the second one takes effect as well, because we sort of they both partially take effect. Rab Shimon says, no. If the biyah of the first one takes effect, then the biyah of the second one does not. If the biyah of the first also does not, so the second one also does not. Okay, so the Gemara says, now on this, what's the connection to what we're speaking about over here? Here we're speaking about Maimer. V'habiyas ben teisha de kemaimer shavu rabbanon. The Mishnah there later says, or the Braisa there later says, that biyah of the Yibum, that is, of a cotton 9 years old is equivalent to Maimer. And v'kamer Rab Shimon, what does Rab Shimon here say? Ein a biyah. That once you did the biyah, or the first one, the first child that's 9 years old, the second one does not take effect. So I see that the biyah of the first one is very strong. And he holds the same thing, Minigay to Maimer. Once you do the Maimer for the first one, the Maimer for the second one does not take effect. So this is the opinion of Rab Shimon, similar to Rabbi Gamliel. Now the third Tana we have here is Ben Azai. Or actually the fourth Tana here, Ben Azai, the Tanya, Ben Azai Omer. Ben Azai said, Yesh Maimer Acha Maimer B'shnei Yevamin V'Yevam Achas. That when you give one Maimer and then you repeat and give a second Maimer, that will take effect if there are two Yevamin here. Each Yavam has a right to do his Kedushim B'Darabanan. The Chachamim gave a koyach to each Yavam to do his Kedushim B'Darabanan, even if there's only one Yavama. But there is no Maimer following another Maimer, B'shtei Yevamos v'Yavam echad. If it's just one Yavam, and he's giving Maimer to one Yavama and then to another Yavama, then the first Maimer takes effect and the second Maimer does not take effect. So in the second half of what Ben Azai is saying, it's exactly like Rabbi Gamliel said, that once you gave Maimer once to one Yavama, you can't give Maimer again to a second Yavama. Rashi has another Gerser in the Gemara that reverses this thing, that it's the exact opposite of what it says over here in Ben Azai's opinion. That when it's a Shnei Yavamim v'Yavama Achas, then ain't Maimer. And if it's Mamish the reverse, you can look, Rashi has here another Gerser. The point is, you see over here, exactly like Rab Shimon said, that one Yavam can't repeat that Maimer two times. Rabbi Nechemia, the last one, the fifth Tana over here, that holds like Rabbi Gamliel, is Rabbi Nechemia that we had in our Mishnah. The Tnan, the Mishnah said, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Achas Be'ila v'Achas Chalitza. Whether the Yavam is Bail the Yavama, whether he gives a Chalitza. And then he says, Bein B'tchila, Bein B'amtza, Bein B'soif, whether he did the Be'ila or the Chalitza in the beginning, the first thing, or the middle, or at the end, after doing other things before, whether a get or Maimer. So, Ein Achrei Klum. Once you boil, there's nothing that follows afterwards. Now, bia psula, when you do bia, not the first. The bia comes after Maimer, that you did already for another Yavama, or after a get, which is called a bia psula, it's a weak bia. The kemaimer shavyu rabbanon. It's the same, it's equivalent to Maimer, it's the same strong as Maimer. The katani and achrei klum. And Rab Nechemia says, just like by Maimer, you can't do a second Maimer afterwards. It's the same thing with a bia psula. Once you do bia, so you can't do Maimer afterwards either. So we see that Bia Psula, which is equivalent to Maimer, you can't do any Maimer afterwards. So it must be that Rabbi Nechemia holds like Rabbi Gamliel, that Ein Maimer Acha Maimer. That's the fifth opinion that holds the same shitta, that Maimer has a very strong koyach that you can't do anything afterwards. Okay.